All right, we are good to go. So thank you guys so very much for viewing another session of NOYO Knowledge. I also want to mention that we are doing these live NOYO Knowledge question and answer sessions through Zoom, and you can feel free to, if you're part of the Zoom chat, to go into the chat bar on the bottom, just type in chat and feel free to type in whatever question that you have a question about, and we'll do our best to answer them as best and completely as possible in live time on the session. But also, I want to mention that this NOYO Knowledge question and answer session is also being streamed via Facebook Live. So if you go to the NOYO Facebook page, you can also stream questions through the NOYO Facebook page for Facebook Live for this event. Now, with that being said, I would like to welcome this week's very special guest, who is a wonderful, wonderful entrepreneur locally, and his name is Mr. Dan Vedda. Dan Vedda has been with Skyline Music in Westlake for, I believe it's 33 years now, and since 1987. And it's not a chain, it's a local store, which I'm all for. I think that's fantastic. They have a website and they do a whole host of things. The website is skylinemusic.com. And I'm going to let Mr. Vedda give a little bit about himself. If you'll tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I've spent the last chunk of my life doing Skyline Music, and I came to retail music from a checkered past. I had a band of my own for a number of years. I was a band director. I've been a writer and arranger for a number of different groups over the years. And I also, as a writer, I've written liner notes for albums. I've written for one of the industry trade papers for the last 20 years as well. So I'm very used to kind of, observing what's going on and trying to, take stock of what we see both in the schools and in the musician population at large. But that's where I come to the table. And Skyline Music was opened basically to serve just about any musical needs. The tagline that we always use is we're helping people make music. And that doesn't differ whether you are a first-time Suzuki violin kid versus a professional musician versus a hobbyist, or an educator, or anybody within the realm of making music. We try to help you solve problems and make sure that making music is what you're able to do, rather than try to, just to try to move products or things like that. That's not why we're here. I've always looked at it as, if people are having a great time making music, they'll get the stuff they need. We use the retail aspect of it to kind of fuel it, rather than asking for grants or anything like that. But the purpose is very much the same. We're education based. We see when we're operating under normal conditions, we see about 400 students come through the store each week. We do things like rentals and repairs and everything, but everything is aimed at making the music making experience that much more smooth and that much more enriching.
Right. Well, I can definitely tell you that you do a lot of great things at Skyline Music. And one of the things that I can say is that we actually had my wife, Katie Holloway, as well as Maya Al-Haddad from the Philharmonia Orchestra at NOYO, participate in the food music against hunger session that you had in December. And so that's just one more example of some of the great things that you do, in my opinion, for the community through music.
Well, and that's really one of the things that I think is central to what we do. We have always looked upon ourselves as a community music store. And a community music store doesn't just mean you're in a geographic location serving the surrounding area. It means that you're stitched into the lifeblood of what goes on in the community, whether that's supporting the kids at school, or in the case that you're citing, we worked with the Greater Cleveland Food Bank to get donations, and both of food and monetary donations for with their system. And we all know, just from the news recently, how hard-pressed the food bank is to serve needs. Thankfully, at the holidays, through the participation of our students, musicians in the community, faculty members, we were able to raise between physical donations and monetary donations enough to cover 13,000 meals in the Cleveland community.
That's fantastic.
And you know, we've done it. That was our 5th year doing it. We're going to continue to do it again. Obviously, this year the need is ever more so. So we're really going to try to work hard at that. But that's part of being. We give the opportunity for the students to help other people through their talents, and you know, by shepherding that through, that enables us to make it happen within the community. There needs to be some sort of a nexus for that kind of stuff, and that's what we aim to be.
Right, right. No, definitely. And it's a great thing that you're doing. And if folks are, you know, watching this video months from now, I would say go to skylinemusic.com around December, November, and see.
Mid-December is when we'll actually run the event.
Yeah, see if there's a way that they can help, if that's actually going on. And, you know, let's get some more food out there, you know, for sure. So, well, today's focus is going to be instruments, maintenance, and care, because that is one of the many areas in which you do a lot of amazing work over at Skyline. And I'm going to kind of get the ball rolling with a couple of questions. Remember, you can type in any questions through the Zoom chat or Facebook Live for those of you who are streaming this. So the very first question I'm going to kick off with is, can you talk a little bit about the importance of instrument maintenance on a few instruments and just in general? So you can talk about winds, strings, percussion. You know, we have a lot of wide variety at NOYO, so feel free to kind of tell us about the importance of instrument maintenance.
Well, sure. I mean, when you think about it, and I do see a lot of families who maybe don't have musical backgrounds, and it seems kind of like a very you know, unusual area to them, and it's, you know, somewhat intimidating. Maintenance is what we do with all of the things in our lives. We maintain our cars, we maintain our homes. If we want them to work as well as we'd like and last as long as we want them to, we do have to do maintenance. It's no different with instruments. There's, you know, there are 2 levels of maintenance. There's the cleaning and hygienic maintenance, and then there is the mechanical and wear and tear maintenance. You know, I get a lot of questions right now about the cleaning aspect of it. You know, certainly with all the things that are going on, people are concerned about, you know, retention of disease-producing things and passing it on, and all the other stuff. And you know, what to do if you've had even the common cold, let alone anything worse. So one of the things we've done too is we've put together and this is available for free from us through a PDF. But we've got a maintenance guide for all the different instruments. It covers all the winds and the strings. And we put it together specifically because we were having people, on the one hand, afraid to do anything, and on the other hand, doing things that might be way too extreme for something as precision made and as fragile as an instrument. I mean, we don't want people boiling bleach in the background and everything. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, but you've got to do it in a way that doesn't damage the materials and the usability of the instrument. You know, brass instruments, woodwind instruments, string instruments, you can't just throw chemicals at them. You basically have to do something that's appropriate. So we do get into that in that PDF. And if you, right now, because we're redoing the website, we don't have it on the website. It will be there ultimately. But anybody can, our email address is skyline@skylinemusic.com. And all you'd have to do is request that in the subject line, you know, instrument maintenance or something like that. And we can return the email with an attached PDF of this multi-page document that gives you, you know, both general instructions and instructions specific to the instrument. And you know, we do have it. We took the time to actually go through and get some pictures and things like that of the processes too, so that you've got some kind of an idea of what it is you're looking at. I think of it as something that, because in a lot of families, mom's the arbiter of cleanliness. You know, we wanted something so that if you weren't the player, you knew that you were doing something that was okay. Ultimately, the players should be the ones cleaning their instruments, and it's an ongoing thing. It's not just I'm sick thing. But this really gives you kind of a template for what you can do with your instrument. So the cleanliness aspect, a lot of those things, we can do them. And much like a lube stop for your car, we have people who will bring instruments into us and say, hey, can you just take care of it? Sure, we're happy to do those things, although we would ask that if you have had a disease issue, maybe don't bring us the diseased horn. Because first of all, we don't want to expose anybody here or on staff to whatever it might be, and you can do the disinfection aspect of that at home, and much more confidently so. So that document will go into a lot of that. The other part of it though is wear and tear. Just like having your car tuned up occasionally, you're using the instruments, and things can get out of whack. We've got, for example, on keyed instruments like clarinets, this is an example of a vintage one, but the basic idea is the same thing. You've got keys that are moving, and key combinations that have to come down together to synchronize to seal airtight. They can go askew of one another, and suddenly the thing doesn't balance and it doesn't play well. It tends to creep up on students a lot, because the first impulse when you're working with a keyed instrument to try to close that hole is just squeeze a little harder. And you almost imperceptibly squeeze a little harder. Well, the note comes out, but it's inconsistent and everything. I often will see instruments, and people will bring them in, and I'll look at the player and say, you're working way harder than you have to. So regularly having it checked up, or at least at the first sign of an issue. If something worked yesterday and it doesn't work today, on a reed instrument, okay, try a new reed. But if that persists, let's take a look at it. There are a lot of things that go on with these instruments that are very simple to fix, very inexpensive to fix, and you will play better and have a much more fun experience if the instrument is not fighting you tooth and nail to get a note out. On brass instruments, they're a little bit more forgiving. The situation we see there is that the moving parts all have to move, and I do see students who will have their trumpet, and they'll have the trumpet and they will never move the main tuning slide. And if it's sitting unmoved for a couple of months, it'll seize up. Now it doesn't move at all, and you can't synchronize to be in tune, or you'll have impurities get in valves. We just had a student who had a tuba from school, and they're at home dutifully getting ready for their play test for the high school. But he didn't play for about 5 days, and of course he, was probably swilling Mountain Dew while he was playing, and the sugars that were in there seized up, and not a single valve would move. It was just completely frozen. We were able to work it out, and it wasn't an expensive thing, but the point is you've got to keep on top of this stuff. And yeah, ultimately it's a good idea to like rinse out your mouth after lunch before you start playing your horn and everything, but the band directors can cover that information for you a lot. But yes, having it checked over regularly, and if there's a problem, let's look at it. We tend to, we do this with stuff in our lives as well. You see something that's not quite right, and it's like, well, that's tilted. Well, let me just prop this under it. It's like nobody ever fixes the things. You can fix these things, and I do see a lot of families who are convinced that this is going to be, $100 out the door. And we have a lot of repairs that are $10, $20, $25, $35 that are real normal everyday things. It makes it tougher because I know there are people in the marketplace that will not do estimates. The minimum bench charge is $50, and it's, that makes it tougher. But, honestly, that's something, regardless of where you're going, you should be asking for a hard and firm estimate on that. And that way there's no surprises, and beware of large repairs that need to be done. I've seen situations where people bring in a clarinet, and the first thing that the person looking at it says is, oh, it's going to need to be repatted. Yeah, you could, but boy, a lot of times you really don't need to repad the whole thing. Students don't tend to use the instruments hard enough that they go through that. Now, I have seen instruments that people bought used, or mom pulled it out of the closet because she used it in school, and now they're pressing it back into service. And I've seen some that needed it, but you definitely don't want to just take the first word and say, well, let's pay $200 and some to get this thing done. I do see a lot of people who they're going to play But boy, as those costs mount up, their ability to actually stay playing is reduced. We want to keep people playing. If we don't have to do the whole thing, let's do what's necessary to make it playable and easy to play and have you get the fun. And we'll tell you right off if it's an instrument that's like, no, I wouldn't even put the money into repadding it. The one thing, and it's a little on tangent to what we're talking about, the one thing that's great for people right now is that there are a lot of decent used instruments on the market. And I have told a lot of people too, rather than taking this 50-year-old flute and trying to overhaul it to make it playable, you can probably for almost the same price find a name brand, decent condition flute that's much younger. Put the money in there. Unless there's sentimental reason because it was my grandmother's or whatever. But failing that, it's not a given that you have to spend a lot of money on repairs, but it's really good to spend some time checking out the instrument.
Right, definitely. Well, actually, I have a follow-up question to what you just said. So, and I guess this would be more for our older students and their parents, is if, let's say that they're seniors looking off to maybe go off to college, or maybe they're NOYO alumni who are checking this out and they're already in college. So one of the things you touched upon, you said that you can help instruments not fight you as hard as what they should, right? And I know exactly what you're talking about through my own experience of having my professional saxophone set up to where, because that's the term, I believe, is just to have it set up, professionally set up. And that way it works to the way that your speed of your fingers and velocity and comfortability. So do you guys also provide that service on that higher level at Skyline as well?
At the professional level, for setup, we can offer that for string instruments because we do have Peter Horn, our string craftsman, who is here. And Peter trained in Mittenwald, Germany, right after World War II, by some of the best teachers of the 20th century. And so Peter can do a lot of those critical things. And again, things that people don't talk about, anywhere from the basic things like getting the string height proper off of the fingerboard, making sure that the sound post in the instrument is set to the optimal place, to the tweakier things. We had one of our students who came to us, and she was studying with somebody from the Cleveland Orchestra, and she was getting her first really high-end instrument. And what she was able to do with Peter was literally they were taking the bridge and they were carving out little tiny slivers here and there to kind of dial the tone in exactly where the teacher was wanting it. So Pete can do that high-end tweaky stuff. We don't do it ourselves on strings, but we do have somebody who can do that. For woodwinds and for brass, we can do all the play conditioning. But when you start getting into that becomes an art form. In the same way that Peter is somebody who has trained and worked all his life to make that kind of thing happen with string instruments, there are people who've done it with brass and woodwinds. We, at this point, can help you get the instrument playing, but when you've got a pro level horn and you want it set up within an inch of its life, and I know exactly, my brother was a saxophonist too, and he, back in the old days, there was a guy named Conrad Coffer who was in Cleveland, and Conrad actually had, like Benny Goodman used to send him horns to repad them and stuff. And I remember my brother coming back with his instrument after it had been redone by Conrad, and he's like giggling because the thing played so well. And he didn't think it was playing bad in the first place. So there is that level of stuff. We can kind of point you to people. There are people in the area who are doing higher end stuff. In some cases, depending on the instrument and on the level that you're looking for, you may have to hit Columbus or Pittsburgh too. There are some really high-end technicians down in those directions. But we can certainly get the instrument playing, and I would consider us a first line of defense. If you've got an instrument that's playing well and you need it set up to pro level, we can help point you. If you've got an instrument that, you're really not ready to spend a few $100s getting an instrument to the nth degree, we may be able to help you along the way. I have, professionals who will come in here and they need a tweak, and I can't take it to my tech. I can't be without it for 2 weeks. We can usually help them get through that period, and we're certainly, happy to look. And I'll be the first one to tell you if it looks like something. I just, I had one of our local teachers contact me on Facebook wanting to know if we could do a high-end setup on a Haynes flute. And I said, no, we can't. I'm not going to be the one who's going to attempt something and then have it botched. I'll be the first one to tell you, you know what, that's a little out of our area of expertise. And what we'll try to do is point you in a direction that gets that solution for you. That's also part of being in the community, is if we can't do it, we try to get you where you need to be.
Sure. And I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, when everybody's so retail oriented, I think that a lot of people would actually appreciate that honesty. So, thank you for that.
Well, it's kind of how when I came up in, I would go into music because I took lessons in a music store when I was first playing trumpet, and the store I was in, didn't really pay attention to the students a whole lot unless they were waving money, and that kind of didn't rest well with me in the first place. And then of course one of the local rock stars would come in and everybody would like cluster around them. And you'd be like, but I wanted to buy the cup mute. And it's, so yeah, to me, the questions from the students are just as important as anything. This is how you figure stuff out. And part of what we do is that whole mentoring of this, you need this, you don't need this. I would pay attention to this. This is going to bite you if you don't take care of this. You don't have to worry about that. We can help guide through the path a little bit. Certainly private teachers can do that as well, but it's also incumbent on us because sometimes we're the only one that gets talked to. We need to be given out good information.
Totally. Well, I have another question.
Sure.
It's kind of a two-parter. So you've talked about repairs on various instruments. So and you've mentioned some of your top level string guy, Peter, but why is it important to have a reputable repairman work on your instrument? And then the second part to that is, what advice would you tell parents and students who are simply just trying to repair their own instruments at home?
Well, here's the issue that you get into. First of all, in terms of having a reputable repairman, I think you should be able to talk to, and it's one of the reasons why we have Peter here, again, under normal conditions, every other Saturday, so that people can actually come and consult with him, hear what he thinks needs to be done. He'll explain what's going on, and then you can decide what you wish to do. If a repairman's not willing to talk to you, all they want to do is take it on over the counter, that, to me, that flags out, because they basically aren't necessarily trying to give you any kind of information. And there are repair people that I've encountered over the years that probably would love to live in a cave and not talk to any humans. They're social distancing from the get-go. And I think that part of the value of a repair is the consultation, that you get done what needs to be done. Maybe there's something that you're going to do down the road because you don't want to budget for it now, but you're aware that this would improve things. Those kinds of conversations are critically important to you getting the best out of your instrument and you being as comfortable playing as you want, because that's how you do your best playing. As far as going through the stuff at home, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you'll see people who do woodworking at a very high level. I would say that the reason they're able to do things and not hire somebody to do it is because they've studied up for long enough to be able to do the things. Unfortunately, there's, the internet is not the best source for information on this stuff, only because it's both highly conflicted. I mean, you'll have people who will set out something as dogma, and then the next person says, I would never do that. And so, it's very tough to sort through it if you're not somewhat knowledgeable in the first place. Second of it, he's like, how much time do you want to spend studying this to do something that we can do for you in 10 minutes and not mess up your horn and everything else? The padded instruments, and Nathan, you're familiar with this, on a padded instrument. So the pads, first of all, are the felt skin discs that are inside that actually close the hole. We'll have people who think that the corks are the pads and things like that, but no, the pads themselves have to seal the hole. They will deteriorate. So we'll have a lot of, kind of like handy dads who will grab a bunch of pads and try to put them in the instrument. And it's not just slamming them into place. You know, they're not parts that snap in the way you would snap in a replacement part for something for your washing machine or something.
Right.
You know, there's a regulation that goes on where the pad has to be level to the hole and seated, and you know, there's more to it. And I'm not saying that everybody should have to know those things. We exist so that you don't have to know that stuff. You know, the whole idea though is that you want to be able to know it's right. We get a whole lot of redos where Grandpa tried to do this. You know, sometimes it's just, you know, incomplete. They didn't know to do this, and this to finish off the system. You know, that happens with the pads. Sometimes it's flat out wrong. Here's my show and tell. So one of the things that, you know, and your wife Katie would probably has horror stories about this as well. So on a string instrument, you know, on a violin, viola, cello, bass, the bridge is only held in by the tension of the strings. So the bridge can come right out.
Right.
We've had instruments come in where Grandpa said, well, what the heck, that came loose, and they glue it down, which is not a great thing. You know, and I just within the last 3 or 4 days, I've also had somebody who came thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. He ruined the instrument. And all that happened was the bridge fell down. You know, and the thing is, you don't know. I don't expect Mom to know, or Dad or Grandma or anybody else to know how all this stuff works, but we're the ones who can kind of walk you through it. So we got the bridge back on, put it under the tension of the strings, and you know, she said, oh, I feel stupid now. And I said, no. You were responsible because you said, this is wrong and I don't know how to fix it. I'm going to take it to somebody who can help me. That's the responsible thing to do, not to just try to slam it back in place or put it back and just kind of ignore it because it's a horrible thing. You know, that's what we can help with and what we're happy to do. But there's a lot of pitfalls. Mouthpieces get stuck in trumpets, and I've had people, you know, trying to get it out, and they pull out the vise, and the brass is too soft. You put something on there with pliers, and you're just going to gouge the instrument. Worst one I saw was a school janitor who decided that he's going to get that stuck mouthpiece out, puts the instrument in a vise, yanks the entire lead pipe off the horn, and twists everything as he does. He killed the instrument basically. And you know, unfortunately, the parents were angry with me because I couldn't put it back together. And I said, I don't do janitor repairs. You know, there's just too much wrong. You know, it would have been $400 to repair the horn if we had all the stuff we needed to do it. And it wasn't a $400 horn. So, you know, we can help a lot. We can save you grief. And you know, again, the idea is you want to get back playing, and playing as well as possible as soon as possible.
No doubt.
One thing we do is turn things around quickly, you know, and because we're doing everything in house, we don't ship it out anywhere or anything like that. But yeah, don't hesitate to get something done. You know, look, we there's stuff that we do. We need to go to the doctor and we don't go. You know. So we do it with the big things too. But you know, a little thing like this, boy, you know, we can make your life a lot easier. We're happy to do it.
Right. Now you held up that miniature violin,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually is a great segue into my next question, which is, what if a student needs to move up from their current size of their instrument, i.e. moving up from a quarter size violin to a half size, or a half size to a full size? How does one know when to move up, and can they come to Skyline under normal circumstances? Can they come to Skyline for that service?
Yeah, we can size up a student anytime. Now, there are some students, you know, we have basically a sizing stick that is based on the arm length rather than height or age or anything like that. So the student's physicality has a lot to do with it. You'll have some kids who are very long in the torso and shorter in the arms, and they may not go to a new size, and their peers might because they're longer armed. That just is the fact of life. It's how we're built. That said, sometimes we'll see a student who's kind of borderline. Do you go a little high? And I always defer to the private teacher or the school teacher, if there's not a private teacher, to make that judgment, because they know the player individually and how they're working and how the hand fit is and everything else. We can see in broad terms, yeah, you're well. And, I've had students who my teacher thought I needed to go bigger, and it's like they're barely in the size that they're on. So there's some, you have to keep in mind that in some school programs, the orchestra director is not necessarily a string player. It's just the system we live in nowadays. They came out of music school and the job availability was for orchestra, and they plunged in, but they may not have the years of experience yet to make them as discerning as a long-term string player would, or as a more experienced player would. That's how we exist to help those, to try to kind of bridge some of those gaps. But yes, when the rule of thumb I hear from most string players, though, is better to stay on an instrument that's a little too small than prematurely go to a large one. Because as soon as you go large, you start stretching, and whether it's fingers or your physical address of the instrument, and then it's when you start putting things in wrong places and getting into bad habits. So if all else fails, hang in a smaller instrument a little bit longer, and you can graduate. But when in doubt, you certainly can ask your teacher. But if there's nobody available to tell you, sure, we never charge for that. It's just come on in. It takes us a few seconds to check your arm and everything. Is like, okay, you're good. You're still in the half size. That's just a service. It's not something that you have to make an appointment for. It's not something that you have to pay for. We just, we want you playing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, you actually touched upon that, which is a great segue into the next question. I mean, we're just kind of rolling along with it. So, let's say that they are ready to move up or something like that. Then how does a student and parent go about renting an instrument? Because you guys do that at Skyline as well. You rent instruments. So how does a parent and student go about renting an instrument? What all goes into that? And do you have like a rent-to-own program, or is it that you rent it and then you just turn it over back to you after a period of time? Can you go into some of those details?
Sure. Yeah, there's an added layer of complexity in the sense that we're actually doing 2 string rental programs at this point. Our own in-house program, and we are an affiliate for Music and Arts, which is a national chain. We added that in simply because we were getting demand that, that's the thing. It's difficult for a small store like ours to buy instruments to rent out. You basically have to, rent it out for a year before you even break even. And, in some cases longer than that. And so that's a whole lot of capital outlay just to do that. So when we started running out of sizes and availability, tapping into the Music and Arts program gives us an opportunity to address a customer need if we've run out of things. But they're 2 very distinct programs. And, in all honesty, if you asked me, I would say I like ours better. But, we know we can't provide, enough instruments to cover, the whole world. So our program, first of all, is basically, it's not a rent-to-own program, because rent-to-own programs assume you're going to rent the instrument you're renting, or you're buy the instrument you're renting. Well, y'all don't want to do that with a quarter size if you're going to grow out of it in a few months.
True.
Same thing with the half or 3/4. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is you build credit up toward the possibility of a purchase. And ideally, the recommendation we'd make is buy the full-size instrument. We've had some families who have like 5 kids who they're all going to play strings and they know it and they want to collect the entire set, and that's fine. But in the main, most people don't want to own a half-size instrument if they've got a child who's playing half-size. Once you're out of it, you're not going to go back to it. You're not going to say, oh, it was my first one. No, everything about your physical setup now says the full-size instrument is what you want. And it doesn't sound as good in a half size. It just doesn't. It's a smaller box. There's not as much sound. So that's, you don't want to own a half size if you don't have to. Some people will, and they'll own and trade in and everything. And there's places that will do that. And there's this ever-changing cast of, trade in, trade with another family. Some Suzuki programs will do those things, and that's a viable way to go too. It just depends more on how much fuss you want to do. In our program, basically, we figure out what size is the entry size. You're coming in, a 4 or 5-year-old might need an 1/8 size. And some of the kids coming in at 5th grade level are going to use a half or a 3/4. Whatever size you're starting with, if you're participating continuously, all the rental fees that we have go into what we consider a rental bank, and that accumulated bank can be used for up to half of the price of an instrument purchase if you choose to make one. You can never purchase something. We've had people rent through the whole school years and then turn in the rental and wave by. Now, I wouldn't recommend it because you put a lot of extra money in that way. We've had people work at it till they were just ready for a full size and get the most basic full size, which you can do. You're not locked into buying a particular price bracket or anything like that. And we had people who wanted to save up. They continued renting because they wanted to save up for a higher end instrument and figure, well, if I got half of it here, I basically budgeted. The thing is, when the time comes that somebody commits to owning an instrument, one of the things that we're committed to doing is having the student listen to the instruments so that they can hear it. And no two instruments are alike. They're not made all out of the same trees. There is a distinction. I mean, there is a distinction on all instruments, but it's more dramatic on the strings.
Sure.
The difference from these two violins versus these two clarinets is the clarinets are probably more subtle, and the player can tell the difference, but your average person can't, right off the bat. However, on violins, parents who have no playing experience will go, that one sounds better. And that's exactly what we're trying to foster. You should, if it's going to be right under your ear, you want to get something you like the sound of. And it's not a given that the better sounding instrument is the more expensive one, because higher end instruments require a level of technique to elicit that sound. Kind of think like driving a high performance car. You got to be a pretty good driver to get the most out of that. This is not going to convenience store stuff. And so those students who don't have advanced technique find less expensive instruments are much more forgiving to give them a nice full sound, and they don't have to really push that instrument to produce that sound. But a highly skilled player is limited by the less instrument, because when they really want to dig in, that instrument kind of chokes out on them. So there's a point for everyone, but parents shouldn't feel afraid of the fact that, no, he's going to listen to instruments. He's going to buy the really expensive one. We've seen it over and again that often the instrument that's maybe the least expensive or the first bracket up is what the student says, I like that one best. And very often what the parent says, he sounds best on that one. So, it is an adventure. And I think, especially when both student and the families are invested in hearing those things, and they understand the differences, and it's readily apparent to them, they make a choice they can be happy with long term. So I would rather do that in our rental program at its culmination than say, all right, well, you paid off the instrument, that's yours.
Right.
We can do selection. Unfortunately, in the music and arts one, that is part of it. If you continue paying, everything goes toward the instrument, and eventually you own it. The first thing in that is you will pay more for the instrument than you would if you just bought it outright. And you're locked into that one instrument. And sometimes, if you say, well, I've got X number of dollars of rental credit, I have $800 of rental credit. Well, you can't choose an instrument that's less expensive than that.
Right.
If you say, well, I want to try 3 different instruments, I guarantee at least one of them will be over $2,000. So, I think I'd rather adapt it to the player and their need rather than saying, that you have to go through all these other hoops. Use the instrument when you're ready to commit to an instrument. Choose the instrument.
Good advice, definitely. So I have one final question, because we have zoomed through, no pun intended here, but so Skyline, I mean, besides all these things that you've mentioned, all these great services, also offers private lessons from a variety of teachers on a variety of instruments. Can you talk a little bit about your private lessons that you give at Skyline, maybe under normal circumstances, and basically, more than anything, just the importance of taking private lessons for young musicians?
Sure. Well, there's a few aspects of that. The very act of taking private lessons, if you were having some difficulties in your math class, you might go with a tutor. If you were really trying to, I mean, students who want to do super well on the SATs will go with a tutor, or some other form of boosting that. Private lessons give you whatever it happens to be that you need, whether that's some remedial help because there's not enough time in class for the student who didn't get it the first time. It just says nothing about their talent. It says everything about how they learn. And if the way this class is learning kind of passes a student by, they could be wonderful, but they need that extra attention. Lessons can do that. Lessons can also open up for the student who gets super excited. Lessons can open up this whole extra world of literature. In the school programs, orchestra or band, wonderful stuff, but they don't necessarily drill down to the solo material, the chamber material, so many things that you can explore. And if you're really hot to trot on some of this stuff, the teacher can be your docent who guides you through this whole thing and acts as a mentor so that you can do it in the most efficient fashion and do it with somebody who's been through that process before, so that you not only don't hit the pitfalls, but you also, when you get to a point where you're frustrated, the teacher can say, everybody has that. We all go through that. I remember going through it myself, and that validation of saying, yeah, you're struggling, and we all do. That's something that you can't get on your own. You can get yourself into that downward spiral of going, oh, I'm not good, I can't do this, I can't. It's like everybody struggles with that as a plateau you have to get past. And that's what a teacher can do for you, is they know you're playing intimately, they know what your challenges are, they know what you're excelling at, and they can kind of guide you through the whole process. A lot of stuff you could look at YouTube videos and stuff like that and stumble through. How much time do you have for the research aspect of that? Maybe you try 6 different things, and that 6th thing is the thing that really worked well. But a teacher may say, forget the first 5, let's just go to number 6. And you haven't burned all that time trying to figure it out. We ultimately, we all have a vision of how well we'd like to play and what we'd like to do if we could play as well as we envision. And the teacher can help us get to that. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with exploring on your own. There's a wealth of really interesting stuff, but maybe use that as a springboard for other explorations rather than as the only way that you learn. So private instruction has that value. What our teachers are doing, a lot of what we do is built on the half-hour private lesson. We have some more advanced students taking hour lessons, but for the most part, the half-hour format is enough for especially a relatively new player to absorb, work on, represent, and digest new material. Also for some players like trumpeters, just endurance. How long can you play before you peter out? For the younger players, they need to build up that endurance, and a half hour can work, but an hour is just it's just not working anymore. So we try to give people the opportunity to choose that, but ultimately the student and the teacher can kind of agree on what seems to be the best format, half hour being by far the most consistent. That said, right now, of course, because of all the COVID-19 stuff, our faculty is doing things via Skype, Zoom, or some other video platform. All the teachers I'm talking to are happy that they're doing that. They all understand that the video format has some relatively large limitations. And it's cumbersome because you can't instantly correct things. You've got to, or you have to change camera angles, or you have to do, it beats not taking lessons, but it's not as good as in person. Moving forward though, I've been talking about in the sense of the COVID-19, some people are going to have a hard time getting back into a room with 2 people. It's going to be a long time. Our teachers are ready to kind of do that whole blended return to lessons with, those who are comfortable doing it, doing private instruction, obviously observing normal precautions and everything. But like if you're a wind player, can't wear a mask, you've got to, figure something out. So, obviously as people realize that, as we get to a point where people can be more confident that they're healthy and the people that they're encountering are healthy, it becomes a different picture. But ultimately we're looking to go back into private instruction, but our teachers are going to be doing Skype one lesson, the student shows up for the next lesson, you know, back and forth as long as that's needed. The one thing that I have been hearing from the teachers, though, is it's a little more difficult to start a brand new student via video, particularly when piano, okay, you know, piano's pretty forgiving. You hit a key, it sounds like a piano, but tone production on a wind instrument, you know, bow grip on a string instrument, those things really have to be kind of micromanaged at the early parts. And it's real tough to do if they're grabbing it and it's not in the camera view, or the, you know, you have a latency going on. You can't play duets and stuff like that. So you know, ultimately we'll be doing lessons as much as possible, and we'll start doing that as soon as the governor says, you know, flip the lights on. And we'll see, you know, those who are comfortable, great. We're even doing things now like redoing our seating areas here in the store so that people can maintain social distance. We're getting into the nice weather. We're actually going to put out patio tables and stuff like that and cordon off part of the parking lot. Hey, you don't have to sit in the car and be all cooped up in there. You can use the table. They're just saying now that ultraviolet light is going to help get rid of some of the virus issues. There you are. Have some sun and you know, and relax and enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, not only for all the information that you've given in this, you know, Q&A, but I mean, just for your 33 years of service to Northeast Ohio, to Westlake in particular. I want to say and remind everybody, Skyline Music is located in Westlake, Ohio. You can go to their website, skylinemusic.com, and something that Mr. Vedda said earlier is if you are a parent or a student who is looking to find out information about cleaning your instrument, all you have to do is email them at skylinemusic.com, and they will be able to send that PDF right out to you.
We're also on Facebook, and we've been posting performances on Facebook, and that is sometimes the way to get the up-to-the-minute information. You can also find us on Instagram. On Facebook, it's just Skyline Music. Instagram is at Skyline Music _Westlake OH. So yeah, so that you can find us there as well. You know, feel free to follow in, and we always welcome questions. You don't have to buy something to ask a question. If we got information, we're happy to share it with you.
Awesome, and thank you for sharing this information. I'm sure it's helpful to a lot of folks, and there's things that I didn't even know. So there you go.
Yeah, well, you know, I tell people after 33 years, I should at least know some things because I was paying attention.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dan Vedda from Skyline Music. Thank you so much for being part of our NOYO Q&A session. And we will be back next Sunday on Facebook Live and on Zoom chat for another round of NOYO Knowledge. Thank you. Have a great week. Stay safe. Stay healthy.